The topic is very simple from one side, but quite difficult from another side. So we're seeing those glamour titles from Goldman Sachs, PwC, that AI will create a 50 trillion market in value in the upcoming 5 years, in just 5 years. And when we think from this perspective that 15 trillion market is like, what, 10% of GDP of the world? And it sounds like enormous amount, right? How overall you gentlemen seeing this creating in value and how you understanding this overall? Is it a good time to build AI in? Or is it kind of bubble when you think 15 trillion in 5 years? Maybe a warm-up question for all of you. Tomas, maybe starting from you.
I actually checked it up yesterday that the top 10 companies by market value already have a total of something about $20 trillion. So I think it's not crazy to even claim that a big part of their revenue could also be impacted heavily by AI. 8 of those companies are from US, all of the big names you know of, Alphabet, Meta, Google, Tesla, etc., etc. So I think it's totally not crazy to think about that AI will have a much bigger impact, and those companies together will keep on growing in value in some sense. It's not an investment advice per se, but even if you think of Google, for example, a very, very big part of their ads mechanism is impacted by AI. So it's not a new thing that we just invented. It's always been here as well. But as we keep on moving forward, it will just have an even bigger implication, I think, to the business models of each companies.
Touching from that point as well, Simon, you are 25 years in the creative tech already, right?
Hold on, you're making me sound old. Slow down.
So, yeah, I was, it's not the first time I'm doing the panels. I was reading your bios, like starting to sweating, but you are 25 years in creative tech already, right? So, as a former CEO of the Ceros, 55 million euros already, as well involved in many projects, AI-driven, like healthcare and so on. So, from your point of view, what just Tomas mentioned, he checked that market caps and of the companies and like trillions, but creating in value, from your experience, what it means like creating in value and how we can measure this creating in value on this AI?
Well, firstly, I'd echo what was said by Thomas. It is an incredible time to be alive, like insanely incredible. And I'm envious of the young folks that are in that crowd, 'cause I'm sure there are a lot of young folks there. I'm nearly 50. I wish I was 25 right now because the world is your oyster. It really, in ways that you can barely even comprehend. So I just want to say this, I echo that. And before I say anything else, I just need to say what my wife told me to say, which is that I have to say hello to all the Lithuanians because my wife is Lithuanian. We live in Connecticut in America, but she said I have to say hi. So I will oblige my wife and say hi to all the Lithuanians. But in answer to your question, I think what's wonderful about AI and where we find ourselves at the moment, and as someone who's obsessed with creativity, when I was growing up, if I had an idea, even if it was a digital idea, to get from that idea to something tangible, even if that idea was, that tangibleness was just the prototype, could be months, if not a year. And we find ourselves in a world with some of the technology that's emerging there and what's happening with the Gen AI and the way in which artificial intelligence is able to manifest ideas in lightning speed. You're in a world where, and I've experienced this myself firsthand, because even though I am old, I'm still obsessed with being hands-on and experimenting with tools. I can have an idea in the morning, and within 3 hours, I'm playing not only with something that appears to be the product that I thought of, or the idea that could bring value into the world, and you asked about value, but I can actually share it with someone and say, do you find value in this? It actually works, and I made it today. Like, from my point of view, as an old guy, that's absolutely incredible. And even as an old guy, I find myself sometimes at 2 o'clock in the morning still tapping away or talking to the AI to get it to manifest what I want. So I think in answer to your question, I think value and generating value is ultimately about creating something that people are drawn to interact with, engage with, and use. That ultimately is what we define as value, and that becomes dollars. And well, in America, it becomes dollars. It becomes dollars, and that's obviously the proxy for what we think of as value. So that's my thoughts there.
Yeah, absolutely. It's so interesting when you think from this perspective that even in your and probably my experience, what I'm seeing a bit 15 years ago with those blitz ideas and all tech way that you can validate ideas and so on. But now AI requires extra skills, right? AI is like extra engineering, understanding data, statistics, and then diving deeper LLMs and so on. And here, I'm jumping to Linas. We have a very small chit chat that he has a PhD student in Stanford. And he said, well, let's stop. You don't need to be a genius. You don't need to be a guru, to build AI. You can actually opt in with a hands-on approach and you can become an AI expert. So maybe Linas, if you could elaborate a bit on that and share your experience, how it's not necessary to be, a genius or, PhD and actually become an AI expert, that would be super cool.
Yeah, sure. So I think PhD is valuable in many ways, and it's a great signal that, you have technical experience or expertise in a specific field. But I think for a lot of problems, like in the real world or like anything, almost anything that startups might work on, maybe besides building foundation models, I just don't think PhD is that necessary. In part because of my own experience of kind of doing kind of academic degrees and doing a PhD right now. So for example, I did a master's degree in Oxford in statistics and machine learning. I think that master's is still considered one of the hardest masters in the world in that specific field. I spent a year almost every day, 12 to 16 hours per day, just studying proofs and problems related to just machine learning algorithms, proving different properties that they had and different features that they had. And after that year, I think today I forgot, I think around 98% of what I studied. And that was only a year or 2 years ago, because it was not even useful for me to do academic research further. That's not even to say that it would be useful to actually build anything in the real world. So I think most skills that you might need to build a specific product or idea or a business, even if it's really technical, it will probably require you weeks or months to study it instead of years. So you'd be actually spending or wasting a lot of time if you choose to actually do a broad degree in anything that's going to give you a bunch of different skills, but what you usually need is 5 or 10% of whatever material you're actually studying. So I'm very optimistic about anyone just being able to learn whatever they want just by sort of sitting down and doing it. I came up to the same degree and this degree. What you realize is that no one is actually that much of an expert. What really distinguishes people who are really good researchers is the way they look at really hard problems is they look at them as a fun challenge. Instead of some proof that you're incompetent or something like that, you just sit down and you work. And we all start our days. Some days I'm gonna look at a proof and I'm not gonna understand anything, and then I'm gonna spend 12 hours a day reading different textbooks. And then at the end of 12 days, I'm still not 12 hours. I'm still not gonna understand much. But then you wake up the next day and you study it again, and then again and again. And so after a week or 2 weeks of that work, it doesn't matter the problems. You're gonna get better. And so I think it's just the way people deal with complex problems and the mindsets of dealing with them is really, I think, the main thing you would learn from, let's say, technical degrees, but it's not some specific skills or expertise. And so that kind of, for me, suggests that almost everyone can really build the technical knowledge they need to build something.
I couldn't agree with you more, Linus, by the way. I have to say something because I have no academic experience at all. I left school at 16 years of age. I have no education at all, zero. And it was harder then than it is now. But to your point, all you need to be, and it's funny actually, my tutor or my kid's tutor once said to me over dinner, how did you get where you are? What did you do? And I said, tutor, I'm not that smart. I'm reasonably intelligent. I'm not an idiot, but I'm very, 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 very curious, and I'm extremely tenacious. And if you're tenacious, and for the Lithuanians, that just means you're very eager to do things and will not stop. If you're tenacious and you're curious, right now, my God, it's insane. You are literally sitting in front of the world's most intelligent machines that have ever been invented for $30 a month or $200 on the Pro now, which is still not that much. You have the most intelligent people in every field ever basically available at your fingertips to spend hours with you, coaching you, teaching you, how do I code? How do I set this up? I mean, I've done it myself. I don't know how to code, but in the last 5 months, I've learned tons because I just ask, and it's there 24 hours a day. It knows more than most educational experts in the world. It never gets bored, and it's constantly willing to help and educate you. That in and of itself, combined with the plethora of content that's out there in YouTube and everywhere else, if you're sitting there in Lithuania, the world is literally your oyster. You can build something and put it in front of the world without very much other than an internet connection and a deep sense of curiosity and a bit of drive. And I couldn't agree with you more, Linus. I literally couldn't agree with you more.
And I think that's exactly what we wanted to hear. The timing is so good, like to build AI. Yesterday, I thought this CB Insight was a report that in average to build $1 billion company, like for it taking 9 years. The classic SaaS, it's 9 years. In Europe, in the US, it's same. To build AI $1 billion company, it's taking 2 years. Now, like, of course, it's maybe too fast to say, but the median is taking 2 years now. It was the CB Insight was. So it means that overall, it's moving so fast, and I'm glad that you don't need to go, to put in yourself so much learning here that, of course, there is a good timing. There is a really, indication of that the material is here, self-learning is here. You don't need to go after those, 10 years investing in yourself. And that's why we, focusing on this as well. AI engineering, then focusing acceleration, but still, Tomas, maybe getting back to this. What are those low-hanging fruits? Imagining that we are, with the program, our entire goal is to go after those AI engineers. The engineers building, the teams with some ideas, some validation, going to acceleration, 3 months, kicking off, 100K, but still, what's next? What could be those low-hanging fruits for validation, market validation? What's your opinion on that?
Firstly, to add on the previous ideas, I think generally we're becoming orchestrators much more. So we have all of these systems. We have ChatGPT and many, many models at our hands and at our disposal, basically. So instead of either doing that ourselves or asking someone, we can just ask the ChatGPT. And I started doing this myself. For example, I need some kind of a data analysis. And I thought, my God, it's going to take me, an hour or two. I don't write SQL that much, and then it's just going to take forever. I'll ask our analyst to do it. I write a message of what I need, and I just paste it into ChatGPT instead of the person, and I have an answer in 3 seconds. I react back to it, maybe re-ask some of the things, it clarifies, but it works, and it does the job, right? So we become orchestrators much more. And that's why even the investment that we mentioned, up to 100K, it goes a much longer way for you as a team, because you don't need that many people. And probably as a small startup, you don't want to have 50 or 100 staff at your hands. I've never talked to a founder who has 2,000 employees and is super excited about it. Everyone says, I hate managing people.
Sorry.
I hate...
I'm sorry.
Yeah, and everyone says, I hate, like, it's weird. You don't get to know people. You don't know their names. It's just too big. Everyone wants to stay small. And I think now more than ever, companies can stay small much longer. So for the low-hanging fruits, in general, I think the times right now are perfect for entrepreneurs and people with entrepreneurial passions, because literally everything is changing. It's like we invented electricity and everyone started thinking like, what if we make this device that if I'm talking on stage, all of you will hear and someone on the internet will hear it, right? And someone just says, all right, we need electricity for a microphone maybe. And it's literally the same thing like inventing internet, and everyone started thinking of new use cases. There was pets.com, for example, that said like, okay, what if we take some of these things on internet? And Amazon, that's how it started. They just said, what if we sold the books on internet, but not in bookstores? So it's literally the moment of that kind of significance is happening right now, because every single application must be rethought in the light of having AI systems at our hands. Everything we're doing right now is changing and should be changing. And I think the new teams, the biggest low-hanging fruit, in my belief, is having that open mind and a fresh page to start with. Because big corporates, like we mentioned Salesforce, for example, before, is super hard to get away from that. You have many people interacting with the process, and it's extremely difficult to take it out of your team, switch everyone to some new system and make that transition. As a small company and startup, you can do that from the very first start. I'm excited about seeing new companies, for example, not having customer support, maybe not having certain functions from the get-go. And on the application layer, it's very easy to start small, and everything that is a bit uncomfortable or annoying or a bit too expensive, you probably can try and turn that into a product.
And as you mentioned, the change, I think it's a very important part, especially for enterprises, corporates, and overall, like we a bit discussed, in many cases, people not like hate change, but afraid of change, right? So when we're thinking about the teams that, have significantly short time to prove themselves with the teams, the knowledge, that idea validation as the startups, as the accelerated startups. Maybe Simon, a bit jumping to you from your experience, would you rather suggest to go after those industries or verticals who are avoiding and afraid of change, or more happy to change from your experience?
I mean, there's one I could talk about a lot. So at my organization, the reason I laughed out loud and I forgot I wasn't muted, but my organization that I founded originally in America, the one that I just recently stepped away from, grew to 450 people. And I totally get that point. That was heartbreaking for me. I loved the people, and all the way up to about 150, I knew almost everybody, and it was wonderful. And then once we got that large, and with COVID, I didn't get to know them. So yeah, I agree that we're in a world where with AI, and I'm founding a bunch of stuff at the moment with young entrepreneurs where I'm seeding those businesses, and I'm looking at the budgets, and I keep kind of tilting my head, and I'm like, I don't know where the fucking money's going to go, because you don't need to spend it like you used to. It doesn't make any sense. You need way less, as someone pointed out earlier. You need way less. And I think when you think about that from when you start to think about those businesses, and you spoke about change and change management, at Ceros, when we were 450 people, 2 years ago, I started to see what was happening with AI, and I, as compassionately as possible, started to tell the team, the whole company, this is coming. It is going to be uncomfortable. It's going to impact people's jobs. I'm going to do everything I can to educate you and treat you as respectfully as I can during that process, but it's going to change. And if I don't, everyone loses their job. And an organization is like a human body in the sense that, and change is like an infection or a bacteria. Human beings don't like change, especially when that change threatens their job, or worse, their purpose in life. Like, that's really dark. And AI threatens not just people's jobs, but their purpose. I'm a researcher. I live to research. I fixed that with an agentic agent. Well, now you've taken my job and my purpose. This is gross. And I understand it is gross and complicated in many regards. But nonetheless, the human beings will come out and try and stop it for the reasons that you suggested, which leads to, again, look at these existing industries and where they are. Try to understand and identify why that organization that's doing $200 million in revenue in America exists. Not what it does, understand why it exists, then understand what it does, ignore how it does it, and ask yourself how you would do the same thing for an AI first lens and go there. Because they're not going to do it. Trust me, the change management of organizations that are 2, 3, 4, 5, 600 people, or 1,000 plus. The change management on AI is the worst I've ever experienced, and I'm old. I've been through a lot of change. It's the worst. So I would agree that it's hard to change. I would agree that people don't like it. I'd agree that it sucks running large organizations because you can't really connect with the people. And I agree that the opportunities lie in tackling those problems that are being solved in traditional ways in an AI first way.
That's a great tips, Simon. Definitely. Linas, as you're coming both from academic and business, backgrounds, how you would maybe add on a bit, knowing the fact that we having those, once again, the AI engineers accelerated with the ideas, how you would say from your experience, maybe this fast validations and adoptions to those new markets and ideas? Because from one side, we're seeing that change is not very acceptable for enterprises, but from another part, we're seeing that it's inevitable, right? The change is happening. So touching your academic experience and as well business experience, how you see from that point?
I don't have too much experience on the business side, so I'm going to essentially assign a pretty low confidence to my own opinion on this, first of all. Second of all, I would actually say that for my personal take, I think there's quite a lot of change in business. Again, maybe like small business as opposed to big business compared to academia. So I think academia actually has much slower like timescales of change in general. Like even the way, I don't know, hiring works or the adoption of like AI, like in teaching, or like kind of just even creating new courses takes a lot more time, I think, compared to businesses. So yeah, I think honestly, like the fact that you, like as Simon was saying before, the fact that you have like an incredibly good personal coach, mentor, and like a specialist in almost any field at your disposal, for me was an absolute game changer. I think to kind of like deviate maybe a bit towards like a general point why I believe like small teams can work so well, I think even in academia, I think no one kind of expected the models to keep on progressing further, or like very few people did. Like there was kind of a belief within industry or the big labs that is going to keep on sort of like actually expanding, like the models are going to keep on getting better. But I've been like doing a lot of tests recently, and like just in general, like well, part of my research is trying to like understand how the models change, how their intelligence changes, generalization, all these skills and abilities that kind of like humans have in a real world. And like I think a really big jump happened not only from like kind of GPT-2 to GPT-3 when like kind of most of us got familiar with it, but also more recently with the emergence of like inference time reasoning models, like kind of GPT like o1 or o1 preview before. And so I think the surprising thing is just like the pace of progress has not really slowed down. And I think almost everyone expected it to slow down. And it was just like there's scaling laws and stuff like that. I kind of suggest that would happen. There's like inherent issues with the architectures of transformers that I would suggest that is going to happen. And yet people just like found ways to overcome all those. So I think essentially I'm really bullish about like what like kind of like fewer and fewer people can do with a given amount of time. And of course, you know, there's a lot of resistance to change, but I feel like it's just like inevitable. Like the way businesses work is that like, I mean, it's just for like competition. You like, I think smaller teams can have such an incredible shot at outcompeting any big teams. Even a good example of that is actually, there's a company in China called DeepSeek. I don't know if anybody's familiar with that, but they build their own inference time reasoning model that I've been actually using a lot in the past 2 weeks, mainly because it's a lot more open sourced compared to GPT models. And they did it with a lot less funding. No idea how they actually managed to get the algorithm so well that even the big labs kind of struggle to. They're probably a team of, I don't know, 10 people or something, and they're able to outcompete or just compete with kind of probably the biggest AI company in the world right now in San Francisco. So I think there's like a lot of proof that it's kind of easy to do things with small teams right now.
And I think so we established quite well right now that probably is the best time to build ever. It's probably we're all on the same page. And Mario, I'd like to ask you a question because I think you're best placed to see all of the new and coming startups, right? So people who are applying to your accelerator and raising money. So very curious what kind of applications people are trying to build. And secondly, like the point that Linas mentioned and before that we talked about is that we don't know if these systems will keep on scaling. But if that does happen, what kind of application would you expect to start coming in? For example, what kind of companies would be coming to your fund in a year or so?
Really good question, Thomas. And I think that we're seeing a very different dynamic that we saw 5 years ago. And first of all, this dynamic starts from the younger and younger people jumping into building a startups, especially AI driven. By younger, I mean 25, 26, because for us it was kind of strange. We always had the thinking, AI is LLMs, and understanding the a bit older people with the PhDs, to all respect, and so on and so on. But the guys, despite the fact they're building agents, wrappers, and so on, they are doing hundreds and thousands in revenue just in few months because they're going to those vertical, agents. They're finding the niche. They're starting here in Vilnius. After 2 months, they're in San Francisco, and they're growing massively. And for us, it was like shockingly, surprisingly good news, but there are too few of them so far. And from one side, we thought, okay, how you can actually compete in the market with all those agents? But apparently, the upcoming 2 years going to be those agents age, it's okay to build an agent on vertical, even it's a wrapper behind, OpenAI, so, Anthropic's APIs and so on. It's okay until you're solving the problem and generating the value and generating the money out of it. And another, interesting finding is that they are not burning too much money here. It means that the team of 5 to 10 people is the cap. They can actually hit those $500,000 of revenues already on a monthly basis and growing and growing. What was the biggest foundation, I would say, that the knowledge, how they gain the knowledge, how to build the agent, how to understand what's the market need. When you are 25, right of the university, there is not a lot of experience of the work and so on. They actually, said, it's about the mentorship. And I was like, okay, who is mentoring you? And guess what? The mentors are the same AIs, the same agents. And it's crazy how it's the loop, because, they know how to find, what's the market need, what's, hardest to change, what's the best tool to use, for the sales, for the marketing, to be the ones. And actually, they're using their own agents to become the best on the market. And these are the guys, from the Baltics, from the Lithuania, and the brilliant part about that this knowledge is also coming here, the validating things. So, for me, it's super inspiring, super engaging, and I think it's a really, really, really good time for all of us who is in this audience to be part of this, yes.
And probably that's why there's so much talk about a single person starting $1 billion company.
Absolutely.
Which seems crazy, but what you just said, like you need some sales training or help with your pitches, you can use an LLM to help you do that.
Absolutely, absolutely. And, touching all those misconductions that you already said, that you don't need to be a genius to be in the AI, right? You don't need of tens of millions of dollars to kick off to run an AI business. You can start on the simple infrastructure that's outsourced. And another misconductions, that in the beginning we thought that AI is only for enterprises, and apparently it's not. You can actually, started being lean and to build a sustainable, profitable, and very growing business.
And when such a team, for example, comes to you, and I think it's good to have a reference point. So someone tries to apply, right? And then you make a selection process. What kind of metrics and goals do you expect to see there? And then given they received the 100K, where do you expect that 100K to take them? So what kind of a metric should they see at the end of this round and when they would be preparing for the next one?
So I think the main part for, venture capital is the ambition. It's you should be, the global company. It's very nice to build a local business and be profitable. It's good, to business. But if you're building a startup, whatever startup you're building, it's number one is the ambition, So it means that you need to want to be in the US or Asia or conquer the Europe. That's the main part about that. I think we all agree, you all agree, that the 100K is nothing, and we understand that it's nothing. But if you put this for validate your thesis, validate the idea, and to spend the trip to US and validate to try to sell the things here, and of course to build not the perfect product, but the product that actually can be an MVP, and you can sell this MVP and to play around this, then there will be a line of investors because you are AI, you are building stuff, you're in a hot topic, and you have an ambition to go US. That's the main criteria. Founding team, ambition, MVP. That's it.
Yeah, I'm living that right now with all different companies. And similarly, it's weird because I'm seeing products that you would have imagined would have a team of 15 people and spent a year, and it's 2.5 people and 3 or 4 months. And I'm looking at it and I'm like, that's incredible what we've achieved, this little group. And to some degree, you get the efficiencies of less bureaucracy, bullshit, and arguments because it's just 2, 3, 4 people, all very much aligned, very clear on what the roles and responsibility are, where my value is, where your value is. Everybody's clear, very little bullshit. It's pretty bizarre. And I think you're absolutely right. You can see those businesses generating $5-6 million in annual recurring revenue with teams of 5 to 10. And Altman said it himself, as someone said earlier, $1 billion company with one person. Doesn't seem insane anymore.
Yeah, exactly. And when you think, that it's not just startups are coming, billion-dollar companies just on a paper. Of course, it comes to numbers, and those numbers coming from the super fast pace of growth, that they finding a niche, even a small niche that needs the change, and they grabbing it, monetizing it, and that's the beauty about it. You can go, you can clash, you can stand up, but you find something, and then accelerate, grow on that. We promised to our audience that they can ask the question. I promised that. I didn't deal with the organizer, but if you have the questions, it's a good time to shoot it. Yeah,
I can maybe take that. So at least one co-founder has to be an alumni of Turing College. So it's not specifically to the program, but the topic of your work must be in AI or data science or current learner. Yes.
All right. Maybe wrapping up a bit. I still would like to ask two things. Knowing the fact that there are young people who really want to opt into AI engineering, and that's a big shift as well. Thinking about the new ideas, what's on their heads, on their hearts, building the new startups. What would be your tip for those people who in the upcoming 3 months on the AI engineering, 3 months acceleration, and then the world of that fascinating growth and so on? What would be your tip and advice for all those people?
Yeah, that's pretty short. I mean, just like anything, anyone can build anything, really. The differences between, I think, Europe and US and mentality and all these things are exaggerated quite a lot. And I think it's becoming like a bit of like a self-fulfilling prophecy where people kind of tend to believe these things and I kind of like have less sort of like belief in their own like value or skills and stuff like that. I have the only picture that I have on my office wall is a picture of the Concorde plane. And I think that's a great reminder of the fact that I think Europe still can have so much ambition. It was a plane that was, well, first off, it's the most beautiful passenger plane ever built. It's the most technologically advanced passenger plane that was ever built. And it was a time where, Europe could still take these incredibly bold moves that the US could even match. Like Lockheed Martin could not build a prototype that could match Concorde specs. So I think a lot of these differences are exaggerated. I think being in San Francisco is probably the best place right now in the world to build a startup, but that doesn't mean that other places are bad or that for some reason you cannot do it any other way. Like it's with like such high connectivity of the world and such easy access to, I don't know, like the same kind of knowledge. Like the things that I read are the exact same things that my friends read in Lithuania. There's no some sort of like privileged access that people here have. You kind of have a bit more of a network, but I think most things can be compensated with hard work and you can always visit here as much as you want to. So I think just like the main thing for Europe is just like kind of people building in Europe. It's just having a lot more belief. Like people in the US are not smarter than you.
No, they're not, Linus. They're not. They're not.
Yeah, exactly. It's just people here have a bit more confidence, I think, in the States. And then that confidence is sort of a lot of times which you actually need to just do these like incredibly difficult things. But as long as you just have optimism and confidence in yourself and being able to do great things, which you can, I think like doesn't need to be any differences between the two continents.
I guess I'll give you my answer. It's funny, Linus, you give me a chance to do the same because look, in my office, I have two pictures. One is order and the other one is chaos. So, this is obviously science and art, I guess, art and science. And my advice is AI sits somewhere in here. There's something very unique between the art and science of AI and how it functions, because it is ultimately a gigantic chaos engine that scales to a point that what you see appears logical, but is actually just chaos. I mean, I'm sure there are people scientifically understand it better than I do, but it is ultimately a box of random numbers that spits out something that feels logical. And as a result of that, as a creative and someone who's wired that way, and I did very badly academically, when I look at the world today and AI and how it's unfolding, it feels like home to me because it's slightly chaotic. And I see engineers and VCs, they're freaked out by it because it's an unpredictable thing. And I'm a creative, so I love everything about it. I absolutely love it. And I think my advice would be similar to Linus. Don't let the fact, I'm in the States, I'm in New York, and I would not let the fact that you're in Europe get in your way. I would gain tenacity, drive, believe you can do it, because that's all the difference is with most of the Yanks. The Americans just believe they can because they're crazy and they believe they can. Do the same. and aim somewhere in the middle between the art and science, because it is an art and science. Manifesting this technology into something useful and valuable to human beings is as much art as it is science for the first time ever, which I love. And I would embrace that. That'd be my advice.
Yeah, I could only add to that or agree with that. I think, and I really believe in the great founders I see, every single one is probably not rational at all. Like all of the fears and ambitions they have, they're like at all not rational. And I think in a way you just have to fight that human nature of trying to stop yourself, do the safe thing, and not take any risks. It's very human to do that, but as a founder you have to fight that constantly every single day. There's a famous funny meme where in the morning a founder says like, yeah, we're gonna conquer the world and it's gonna be the greatest thing we're building. And late at night, you're saying like, "Yeah, I'm just scrolling jobs on LinkedIn. Like everything's burning down. You know, it's not going to work." And you have those roller coasters on a daily basis. And I think the best advice I could give probably is to really take that leap of faith and trust the process. And you're not going to see results in the first month, in the first year. Heck, us three were working close to 10 years already, and only the past couple of years, I would say, things got interesting for us. And still we have many years to come to see big results. But I think being very patient and turning off that rational thinking is definitely key in building any startup. And you just have to focus and trust the process, essentially.
Yeah, 100%. It was the Apple commercial. You remember the Apple commercial? One of the most famous Apple commercials ever that makes me cry when I watch it. Almost every time I well up, I cry. And it says in the line is that the people that are crazy enough to think they can change the world are the ones that do. And it couldn't be any more true. You have to be a little crazy. You got to put against all the logic and the rationales, got to go out the window, feel it in your heart and go do it. And big up that. I love it.
Summarizing, it feels like, we are all smart enough to change the world. We need just to be a little bit patient and brave, right? So, gentlemen, last question. What's your biggest wish in those 5 years with this AI? What are you actually waiting from this AI angle? Maybe someone will catch it as a challenging idea, I know it's a tough question.
My answer, I felt, for a second, I felt kind of emotional. My hope in the next 5 years, I have 2 small children. They're Americans. My wife's Lithuanian, I'm English. They're Americans. They're 7 and 8, and I genuinely felt that was where I went in my head when you asked that question. I just hope that we leverage this extraordinary power, and most of the planet, 98% of the planet, has absolutely no fucking clue how impactful and powerful this thing is. They're asleep. Okay, 98% of VCs are asleep. They don't really understand it. I hope and pray that we use it for good and that it manifests in a way that we can transition from the world we're in, where we don't have a super intelligence in our midst, that we can yield, to a world where we do, where we get to abundance and a greater place without a dark moment. Because I've got 2 young kids, and I hope the next years are not dark, go dark before they go light. That's my hope. Sorry for the heaviness, but that's what came up when you asked the question.
It sounds fascinating. Yeah, I really feel you. I had kids, so yeah, it sounds really good one.
Yeah, I mean, honestly, like almost the exact same thing that Simon said. I think essentially with the pace of progress that we have today, I think in a lot of ways, this like kind of specialized human knowledge or like that level of intelligence, I actually don't think it's too far away. I don't even know anymore if there's any ever needs to develop some new algorithms, or is just at this point just a problem of engineering to get there and just scaling up and scaling up, because of how promising the recent work has been in the last year or like a few months in time reasoning. So I just really hope we're able to use it well. I think essentially there's just the value that it can unlock in so many different ways. One thing that I'm really frustrated by in Europe and the US is just like bureaucratic like levels, and like just being able to let people do the jobs they actually want to and spend less time on things they never wanted to do in the first place. Helping people like unlock sort of like the potential that they have is so incredible. If we're just able to use well, as Simon was saying, and I think a lot of safety effort has to be put into that. I don't think there's like enough investment or just like attention to that. I think the big labs have their own like red team, they call like red teaming groups and stuff like that, or like. But I think just taking that seriously and taking both the upsides and the risks seriously I think is the best path towards a future that is much better even than the present. And the present is already pretty amazing.
That's all the futuristic books written 70 years ago about that. Fingers crossed.
Yeah, from my side, I'd hope for three things, I think. One is that generally the scaling laws don't break down and we can keep making the system smarter, all the LLMs smarter, so they can achieve bigger and greater things. Secondly, I really loved the move by Meta by open sourcing it. And it's quite a bit ironic that Meta, a public company or privately held, is open sourcing while OpenAI is not open sourcing that many things. But the open sourcing of these models, I think, is very important for the future, and that enables many, many builders to keep on doing that. And finally, if we get energy costs to very low numbers and energy becomes essentially free, I think having these three conditions met, the free markets will do their job, and a lot of people will create great companies, great applications will be found, and an incredible future is there for the world to take.
I wish creative people catch it as a challenging idea, to start thinking about it. Thank you, everyone. Thank you, Tomas. Thank you, Simon. Thank you, Linas. A big applause to you guys, for sharing the knowledge.